Self-esteem is probably something we all wish we had more of. When we have low self-esteem, we definitely know it, and at times it can be really hard to know how to actually develop self-esteem. But what exactly is self-esteem all about, and how do we get more of it? What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched, and like I said, this week we're going to be taking a look at what self-esteem is all about and how we actually get more self-esteem. So the first question we have to ask is, what exactly is self-esteem? Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. It's made up of two components: self-competency and self-liking. Self-competency is basically our belief in our ability to undertake tasks. If we feel that we're competent, if we feel that we're able to undertake tasks, then it's less likely that we'll have issues with self-esteem. Likewise, if we think we're going to be terrible at undertaking tasks, if we don't think we're competent, then it's more likely that our self-esteem will reduce. Now, the second part to this double-edged sword is self-liking. Now, that's basically how much we actually like ourselves. If we think of our attributes and our characteristics, even things like our appearance, if we don't like those things, then it's more likely that we'll have reduced levels of self-esteem. Self-esteem is basically an overall sense of self-worth and purpose. It's seen as a personality trait, which basically means that it's stable and it can actually be long-lasting at times. It also means it can be really difficult to treat, and if we have low self-esteem, at times it can be really hard to develop positive self-esteem. With self-esteem, we construct thinking patterns and beliefs about ourselves that are either helpful or not. These beliefs are things that we stick to, and they're often focused on things like our ability, our competency, our appearance, and our attractiveness. So why exactly do we need self-esteem? Well, first of all, we need it to stay motivated. We need it to value ourselves and to improve our quality of life. Perhaps a real question that we have to ask here is, what would life be like if we didn't have any self-esteem? Well, we wouldn't be very productive for one. We'd struggle to find joy in things, and we would avoid tasks that might not be effective for us or we think we're going to fail at. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which I'm going to picture here, you can see that esteem or self-esteem is one of the foundational needs that people have to have in order to reach self-actualization. Maslow stated that we need esteem for ourselves and for others in order to reach that process of self-actualization. So what are the kind of factors that actually impact our self-esteem? Well, there's a genetic factor. Now this can play a role. If you have parents who have low self-esteem, if you've been around environments that have low self-esteem, then you could argue that there's a genetic factor to an extent, but it's more often in the case that our experiences have an impact on our self-esteem. There's also something here to be said about a factor like overly critical influences. If we've had overly critical and harsh caregivers or parents, then it's more likely that we're going to have issues with our self-esteem growing up. So we've had a little look at what exactly self-esteem is all about, the causes of self-esteem to an extent, but what exactly are the symptoms of good self-esteem and bad self-esteem, and how do we know the difference? Well, good self-esteem consists of things like confidence, for example, an ability to say no and an ability to express our own opinions, a positive outlook on things, and an ability to see failure as an opportunity for development rather than a reason to give up. So those are some of the symptoms of, well, you could call them symptoms or some of the characteristics of good self-esteem. But what about bad self-esteem? Well, there's a focus on negativity. There's a fear of failure and a focus on the things that we're bad at rather than the things that we're good at. There's a discount of evidence that might suggest that you're good at things or effective at tasks. And there can often also be things like feelings of shame and guilt with any situation. So what are some of the ways in which we can develop our self-esteem even if our self-esteem is really, really low? Well, the first thing before I go through these points is to ensure that you actually write some of this down. It's important to maybe have a self-esteem journal to help write down some key points that you can refer back to and some logs and some instructions that you can take yourselves to refer back to in order to develop good self-esteem. The first thing you have to do is to identify the negative beliefs that you actually hold about yourselves. Then you can actually work on challenging them. Take note of some of the things that come to you, things like, I'm stupid or I'm unworthy of love. Ask yourself, how do you actually feel about those labels that you give yourself, and what evidence is there to support those things? Start then to think about evidence that doesn't support those negative beliefs. Now, it's important to really invest time and really think here, because at first it's going to be, oh no, I can't think of anything. But you really do need to invest some time and effort in thinking about evidence that suggests contrary to those negative beliefs that you have about yourself. The purpose of this is to start to challenge and change our appreciation of those negative core beliefs. In low self-esteem, often what happens is we think the very worst about ourselves. And in so many ways, low self-esteem is like a magnet, or self-esteem in general is actually like a magnet. If you were to place a really strong magnet in a room, it would attract all the metallic things to it, it'd leave everything else out. When we have low self-esteem, those negative core beliefs are like a magnet. It attracts all the evidence, it leaves everything else out, it doesn't consider anything else, it only attracts those things that make it stronger. We want to change that and start to consider all the things that the magnet is ignoring. What evidence is there to suggest that you might be more effective or better than your self-esteem actually tells you? The next thing you can do is to recognize what you're good at. One of the things that happens with low self-esteem is that we fixate on the things that we're bad at. We give little attention to the things we do well. Again, we want to change that. Start taking a note of the things that you're good at in another section of that journal. It's important to start developing a list here. Perhaps you're a good mother, or perhaps you're kind. Perhaps you're a good friend, or perhaps you're good at taking care of your body. Whatever it is, if you're good at it, then write it down. The next thing you can do, and you should do if you've got really low self-esteem, is to start building positive relationships. You need to ensure that you're supported in developing good positive self-esteem. Like I said at the start of the video, one of the ways in which self-esteem can reduce is because we have unsupportive parental figures or guardian influences. If you don't have positive relationships around you, then it's going to be harder for self-esteem to improve. The next thing that we need to consider is to actually be kind to yourself. Be kind to yourself in every way that you can think of. You're more valuable than those negative core beliefs tell you, and hopefully some of these exercises that I've just gone through will help provide evidence to suggest that. Also, be kind to yourself with the developments that you make with self-esteem. One of the key characteristics of people with low self-esteem is that they can avoid situations, they can have that fear of failure that we looked at on GetPsyched the other week. And so it's important to stay consistent with actually trying to develop self-esteem. At times it can be slow and challenging, and initially you might not see many results, but I encourage you to stay with it as much as you can. Invest in actually trying to develop positive self-esteem for yourself. Okay guys, thanks so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This week we've been taking a look at what self-esteem is all about, and we've been looking at ways of developing self-esteem even when you have really low self-esteem. If you've been enjoying the video guys, then make sure to hit that like button. You can also comment on the videos and you can share them too. And if you've been enjoying GetPsyched as a whole, then make sure to hit that subscribe button, and you can hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and get weekly reminders every time I upload. Thanks again for watching guys, and hopefully catch you next week.